Today at Manchester Theatres, I am with renowned psychologist Emma Kenny, whose latest show, Killer Couples, is coming to the Manchester Opera House for one night only on Wednesday, the 19th of February. Now, Emma is recognised across the UK as one of the leading experts in television on psychological things and bits and pieces, and you may have seen it on shows such as This Morning as one of the agony aunts. She also has lent her skills to loads of radio shows, including the BBC, Heart and Magic, and podcasts such as Russell Brand's Under the Skin and True Geordie. Again, Emma uses her therapeutic knowledge to contribute to magazines such as Grazia, Cosmopolitan, Closer, and this is all on top, of course, of her own YouTube true crime series that is one of the most popular out there and is growing day by day. There is so much going on in Emma's life, so thank you for joining me today. I don't know how you find the time to do it all, but yeah, how do you go from kind of qualifying as a therapist and then into all of this media outlet? So from clients to all of this.
I mean, my journey into TV and media was just by mistake. It's as simple as that. So I was running a mental health service for disaffected young people who were involved in crime. And that was always my passion, just working with victims and working as perpetrators who were young enough to change and are often victims themselves. So I guess that was where my passion had from the get-go. Right from university in my undergrad, I volunteered, and it was just something I'd always seen myself doing. And then my actual organization, which was Crime Concern back in the day, probably doesn't exist anymore, but at the time it was a brilliant charity. It was very much about mentorship of young people who were involved in crime. And they kind of offered me this place and position that I loved. And then somebody got in contact from a production company, and they said they wanted to do a basic documentary, selective mutism. And selective mutism was something I'd worked with. And I got back in touch with them because, now I know a lot about the media. Back then I knew nothing. I didn't know that this was something that regularly happened, that people would just be asked about these things for information. And I just got in touch with them and said, I think this selective mutism is a really challenging one to do based on the fact that obviously that can be problematic for the child in that situation, and it can be very exposing for them. It has to be done in a very sensitive way. And prior to that, they'd asked me about doing one on people who were completely isolated, children who were refusers to go out of the bedroom. They were very conscientious about who they were with and what was going on. And I said, I don't really think that would help, because I think what you'll do there is just put more pressure on this child psychologically, and maybe you need to rethink your strategy. So I helped them with the ethics on that. Now, they did actually do a selective mute documentary, but they did it in a really sensitive way, and it was really, really good. And I just left that at that point. There was no issue there. And then somebody asked me whether I'd do a intervention with a client that they wanted to put on TV to make sure that they were psychologically in a good place to do that. So I agreed to do that. I didn't know why they were asking me, but hey, I do interviews all the time, not a problem. And then out of the blue, I got an opportunity to go and do a screen test. And it was for Objective Productions. And they said to me that they were going to do this part documentary, part fun experience for the BBC. And it was a psychological opportunity to do old experiments in modern day. Basically, a bit like The Real Hustle. It was all about creating psychology for fun and also for information. And I thought, I don't know, at least they ran things like comedy outlets. They had a lot of comedy stuff, Objective Productions. So I thought, well, maybe it's not going to be super, super serious. And so I ended up going down, standing on London Bridge, making people walk around a coffee cup, wearing a tabard to test authority. And I got the thing. And I don't think I ever thought about it. I just thought, oh, you know what? That'll be fun. I did the series, a 20-parter. And then people just kept getting in contact with me. So I fell into it. There was just a falling into it. And then on top of that, a friend, the other thing, as you will know, you work in this field, but a lot of people don't know, TV and the media is the most insecure position to be in if you work as a freelancer. So people go and work on a program and then they've got to find work again. So they're always moving around. So I guess that when you've got a reputation with one person, they take you over. And so a guy called John Millership, who was a producer and director, he said, I've got this really, really low budget crime show. I know you've worked in crime. I know that's kind of a passion for you. If I pay you 150 quid, will you come and do it for me? And I did it. And that began Britain's Darkest Taboos, which I did for like 7 seasons. And I suppose that I've been really lucky because I've never felt fully invested in the media. I've always felt like my passion is with mental health and helping people and crime, and helping people understand a different understanding per se of crime and why people end up there. And at the same time, being able to have the opportunities because I have worked in the media. So it's kind of been that. It's a limited answer, but I fell into it. I stayed in it, but I've always considered it something of a side thing for me until COVID. And then when COVID hit, everything changed. And at that point, everything became crime and psyche and mental health, because that whole world just blew up.
Yeah. Wow. What a journey. What a journey.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It has been a journey. I'm still on it, and I'm still quite surprised by it. But you know, the beautiful thing about people is that they're very loyal. I'm very lucky. I don't ever underestimate how privileged I am to be in this situation. I feel really grateful.
But I think it's because your work is so personable. It's not what you would necessarily expect from crime and from psychologists. You're just you, and you're authentic, so people connect with that really, really well. So we're going. Sorry, go on.
I know I was going to say that is really important to me.
Yeah.
It's really important to me that people see me as exactly the same as them, but simply with a little bit of expertise in an area. You know, yesterday my Facebook is a big platform. I've got hundreds of thousands of people there. And last night I just put on, I want to start doing some lives again, because I used to do mental health lives. So during COVID, I used to do guided meditation every single night for 3 months, literally, to try to help people to decompress from the horror that was happening. And during that period of time, I'd always done mental health lives once a week, and I ended up doing them 3 times a week. And then as I started to move into shows and writing and all those things, I kind of don't do that as often. And last night I put up a post saying, look, this is my crime channel on Facebook, but with respect, I'd like to start doing some mental health work again and doing some lives for you. And it just went crazy. And I just sat there and thought, wow, you know, in this climate right now where more people are feeling really isolated and on their own, actually just doing something like that, you realize how desperate people are just to connect and just to converse about how they're struggling. So it's been really lovely for me, because like it is an amalgamation of everything that I love doing. You know, I do love doing storytelling. I love it because that's what you're doing when you're talking about cases. And I love justice, because one of the things in the UK is it's imperfect, our system. And of course, there are big problems in the legal system. Everyone knows that. For the most part, working hard at justice. And at the same time, digital media gives you a platform where people connect on a really personal level. So I don't want to be seen as anybody different to them. And I certainly think that if you're an academic or you're a professional who feels the need to act aloof and authoritarian, you're probably in the wrong job when it comes down to it.
Yeah, probably. So we've got Joe, killer couples. So who are we talking about? Who is it that you'll be looking at, dissecting?
Well, it was really interesting, actually, because I went and spent a month in Thailand because of the fact that I'm able to work abroad. And I was doing some filming for some ads out there, and my son is out there. I have very old children and very young children. So at the end of the day, I have like this beautiful kind of experience of family doing different things and still being at home with little ones. So I fly out, I arrive there, and there was a press request. For those people who don't know at home, what happens with the media is if they get a story that they want to put out, they give you a little nod and they're like, please answer by 4:00 this afternoon. And basically, if you don't get the email, they're going to publish it, right? It's rotten. It's a rotten world. And if people aren't aware of that, be aware of it. So anyway, I arrive in Thailand. It's a long trip. I'm totally jet lagged. I open my email. It's way past 4:00 in the UK. And somebody's actually seen the advert. And obviously the advert has people like Hindley and Brady, because they're probably world over the most notorious killer couple. They're heinous beings. And this journalist had done this hit piece on the show and basically said, interviewing this man who apparently had once worked years ago with a police officer who was affected by this crime. Of course, you couldn't be a decent human being and not be affected by this crime. He's still affected by this crime now, and had made it about glorifying their killings. And it was really intriguing for me, because first of all, I've not put the show on. So what are you doing saying that? And secondly, the absolute opposite is true. So the show isn't about the brutality of the killings, because everyone knows that. For example, Hindley and Brady I don't talk about who was murdered because it's irrelevant. I want to talk about who are these human beings, in particular, Myra Hindley, because often people focus on Brady and try to make Hindley into this hapless victim sidekick. And the truth is very different. So my job is to dissect in those cases the person you believe you know through the press and through books to the person that I believe actually existed. And to not, of course, go into deep, dark detail about what happened to those victims, but more to unpick what the hell happens to create this, some would say, follager. Some, like myself, would say people are born evil and know how to sniff each other out. It's incredible that just as you can sniff out a victim, as a predator, you can also sniff out an equal predator. So I look at some of the biggest cases, of course, Hindley, Brady, the Wests, because another really infamous couple. I look at gender bias because for some bizarre reason, we really struggle that there are women out there who are evil, as if just because women on the whole, and I know that there's a lot of talk about gender being all the same and we're all very similar. Look, we are quite similar. Men and women are quite similar. It's true. But we have these very distinct differences. So when we look at personality studies, women score high on agreeability and empathy. Men, it's not that they don't score high on that. It's just that they like things sometimes more than their relationships. They're interested in stuff. That's why STEM careers are full of men. Not because women can't do it. Of course we can do it. But we might not choose to because we're naturally acclimatized to other things. That's why women care and go into vocations like that. So I'm really intrigued into how that bias plays out in the courts, in our own minds, and of course, the interplay when it comes down to these killer couples. I look at probably one of the most terrifying thrill killer couples who weren't intimately related. So Lake and Ng, that's NG, the second name, so Ng. And that is one of the cases that when I came across it and read books and did research, it's kind of stained my conscience. You know, there are some cases that affect you in a different way. Obviously, every single one of the cases I've just outlined affect me because I can't quite believe that anyone exists that can be that purely destructive. And particularly where children are concerned, it just blows me away. But there's something about thrill killers. It's a little bit like if you were talking about a serial killer and you think about Joanna Dennehy, who's one of our own, killed 3 men in Peterborough over a 10-day period, also thought she'd killed another 2, wanted to kill 9. There was something about the absolute enjoyment that she got just knowing that she had that power to exert. So it's the same with that kind of killer. So I try to look at typologies, I look at what creates them, and essentially go through individual cases, looking at different aspects of each of those cases. And hopefully by the end of the night, people will go home feeling like they know more about the psychology and also more about the cases themselves than they might have heard in documentaries.
Yeah. So is the makeup of when you get killer couples, is it more likely from a psychological viewpoint that they're going to be in some form of a relationship as opposed to 2 friends? Or why?
So
why
if you think about a follager, so if you're taking that psychological condition, so the madness of 2, a shared delusion, believing that you have a right to do what you're doing because one gives the other a permission base and validates and amplifies their behaviors, tends to mean that you need to have that intimate space because otherwise you wouldn't be spending that intimate amount of time, you wouldn't be sharing your perverse fantasies, you wouldn't be talking about the depravity that inspires you. So you're kind of more likely to get a couple who do that. However, there are couples who are not intimately related. So as I was just saying, Leonard Lake and Charles, they're not related. They were friends. And I suppose it was more the unholy alliance that they had. They got what they both had fantasy-wise in their minds. But obviously, the reason that it tends to be more intimate couples is once you are involved in that, it creates the reliance. And it also means that it's harder to leave because obviously you could then inform on the other person. So that kind of cements them. So that's more why you get this kind of fantasy group who connect and then engage in the actions. Whereas if you think about serial killers, they have exactly the same kind of mindset, but one could say they don't trust other humans. They're more Machiavellian in the way that they approach it, which is they don't want intimacy necessarily, but will get it elsewhere with somebody who's completely unaware of their behaviors. And therefore, they kind of make themselves safer by not sharing the knowledge. Deals with killer couples, that sharing is both something that informs and escalates their behavior, and also is usually the reason for their destruction in the end. Because usually they turn on each other, don't they? Usually at some point, they're going to say, well, actually, it was all that person's fault, even though we both know that's not true. Yeah, absolutely. I was just pressured. I was coerced. And you see, that's interesting with the gender bias, because it tends to be that even today, the courts will look on the female as a lesser party, which just astounds me, because just because a man is physically more dominant, just because a man might be the person who's being more physically aggressive at certain points in that situation, that doesn't mean that the woman hasn't been the leader in so many of those aspects. And hopefully that's one of the things that people will go home with, more about equality about their investment in the crimes, as opposed to the she was coercively controlled. Because it kind of annoys me when people, and there's a lot of experts out there that I respect who would disagree with me, but what annoys me is this idea of making women seem more vulnerable than they are. You know, most women don't walk around feeling entirely vulnerable, and we're very capable. And if we have decided to do something heinous, just like if we've decided to do something good, we don't expect to have somebody excusing our normal behavior and saying it's all because this person's made them do it. You know, if somebody was doing amazing things for the best in the world, no one would be going, well, it's because the guy forced her to be a really good person. And yet when it comes down to
people would have something to say about it.
And rightfully so. And so when it's the deviant side, it's like, oh, but there, it must be that men force them. And it just is entirely untrue as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. It's so complex, isn't it? I mean, obviously that's what you do, but it's so, for me, who's outside of that, listening to it, it's so fascinating and complex. And
no, it's fascinating to see as well. No one's ever an expert, are they? No one ever knows what's going on in the minds of these murderers. You have to analyze it and research and come to your own conclusions. But that's one of the things that keeps you hooked, because it's an ever-evolving field and you really want to understand. And you can do as much work as you like, but you'll never truly understand because you're not like that. It's the very thing that keeps me hooked in crime, because I sit there and I'm like, I can absolutely understand wishing to kill if somebody has done the most diabolical thing to somebody that you love. Not everyone has that feeling. There are some individuals with amazing compassion and forgiveness. You know, you look at people like BTK, Dennis Rader. In court, the only time he broke down was when one of the parents of one of the children that was killed actually said, I don't hate you, I forgive you. And it just broke him. Now, I would be the person going, I hate you and I want to kill you because of those feelings. And I think that I can relate to that kind of killing, because in your head it goes, well, that's just, I don't know whether I could really do it, but I can believe it. But then when you think about these people just taking these wonderful, incalculably important human beings and then doing the most diabolical things with them and then killing them, and having no care about the impacts on all those people that it affects, as well as the individual whose life you've snuffed out, I just never understand it, no matter what. It's kind of something that's always desperate for me to find more out about, because I just want to figure it out and I can't. I'm always going to be hooked in that area.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's so complex. And even though there's, I imagine, even though there are traits that are similar for, you know, for killers, everybody has got their own path to that point. So there's 100%. No answer. There's no one answer. So you
absolutely right.
You're coming to Manchester, your hometown.
I did it. I'm dreading it. This is Manchester. I don't know why it means what to me. I don't know why. I love every place I go. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But there's just something about people in your hometown coming where you're like, okay, I really need to make this a great experience for them. And it's just unbelievable to me that people come anyway. So being at that particular venue as well, it's just quite iconic in Manchester. So I just feel like a level of gratitude and horror in the same experience, just thinking about it.
It's weird, isn't it, that though, that again, that's another psychological thing, I suppose, that when the people that you know and love are the ones coming to watch you, you'd think on paper that'd make you calmer because you're in that safe space, but actually it doesn't. It makes you more nervous, doesn't it? Yeah, it's bizarre.
And do you know what's really ironic? It's really ironic because true crime fans, and this annoys me, because again, you see psychologists coming out and saying, oh, It can be really bad for your true crime. You know, it can desensitize you. Like, actually, the mass evidence we have is that mostly women watch true crime. 80% of viewers watch true crime are female. The split is different on YouTube, but that's because about 80% of people on YouTube are male. So it's an easier split there of like 40-60. But TV and those mediums, it's women, and it's women who buy the books, right? And women do it not because they're voyeuristic, not because they're macabre, but because they want to understand something that feels so foreign to them. So I get the audiences who are the kindest group of human beings ever, because they're all engaged in the area, they're all really interested, they're all very respectful. And also there is a higher proportion of women, which makes it just a very kind environment. Not to say that guys aren't lovely, they are, but you know, just it warms my heart as individuals come. So I shouldn't really be worried, because I promised you I could stand on stage and really break down and they just come and give. That's my audience, but it matters to me, and it matters to me that people feel it's respectfully handled. It matters to me that people don't feel that it's gratuitous in nature. It matters to me that the videos that I play, which are really affronting because it's real, don't cause damage, and make sure that people feel comfortable with all of that. So there's all of that interplay. And at the same time, I don't want to stand on stage as an expert. I want to stand on stage as one of those individuals who are invested in this area. So it's all of those things going on in my mind when I actually present. And of course, because this is my new show, I've done killer cults, I've done the serial killer next door. But because I know those shows intimately and I've done them so many times, and it almost feels like now I'm just going on stage to talk about something that I love. This is always going to be a new show that makes me feel like, have I got it absolutely right? Is it going to be perfect? And I always get told by and my son, who both work with me, it's fine, you can refine it. And as I said to my son this morning, no, because every single show, every single person deserves exactly the same experience, not for me to get better at it, but for me to present immediately what everybody else is going to get. So I do put quite a lot of pressure on myself, but that's because people deserve it. Now, money is really short at the moment. People are really struggling. So for people to spend the money that they're spending to come and watch a show, and I know that my tickets aren't extortionately priced, but the point is, that's something you're making a choice over because you want to know more. And it's my job to make sure that those pounds spent are spent really well. So we'll see. Manchester is an amazing, but also quite terrifying, without a doubt.
Oh, well, but I think it's because even though you are stood on stage as the expert and you do have the knowledge that people in the audience don't necessarily have, however, your intrigue and your trying to figure it out and your passion about it is exactly the same as the people that are coming to watch it. So as I said earlier, you're still on that level. There's an authenticity there, and it's like it's not you as this authoritative figure and then everyone else.
Oh no,
it's us together. But yeah, but that's why it's safe. It's
absolutely
all of you together. And I think that really is what sets you apart from a lot of the other shows as well.
Yeah, I hope so, because I don't want to see myself as anything special. In fact, that's quite the contrary. That's one of the reasons why digital media, because I was in TV for such a long time, and you don't have any control over the edit in TV, and you do get a bit bored of them cutting you and you're just saying he was a narcissist or he was a psychopath, because you're like, obviously if somebody is brutalizing people, they're going to have antisocial personality disorder. But there's so much more to talk about. And I think with COVID, and I guess the same for you because you work in this field, you know, it's pretty catastrophic for people in the world because their jobs got thrown out. They had problems with their families. They were obviously dealing with fear. And for me, you know, I used to do This Morning regularly, you know, twice a week. And of course, I was very outspoken during COVID because there's a very simple equation. You don't lock predators up with children. It's very easy. I can't be invested in locking down people. I don't want women, I want children to die. And whilst, you know, all the stuff I said on videos when I was launching these things went to the government, you know, it was taken by a particular MP and read out. So I was doing work that was advocacy. It didn't work very effectively for television because they wanted a particular narrative. And I'm afraid I won't toe any narrative that causes harm. That's not what safeguarding does. You know, my job is to care about ordinary people's lives, and certainly abused children and their mothers, particularly, you know, the murder rate of children went up, and we know that the head injuries were ridiculous, and you were sitting there in that situation thinking, well, what do I do? Do I toe the line, say the right things, or do I actually say to myself, integrity matters and people's lives matter? And I made that decision. And I think initially I was like, wow, you know, I'm going to have to rethink what I'm doing. I just thought I'm going to just start doing some videos in my lounge about crime, because I love doing that, and I love doing psychology, and I love talking about things in a way that I feel is relatable and people can kind of engage me over. And I thought it'd just be me and like 5 people who'd just find me and be like, oh, all right, Emma, that's great. And what I realized, and it's been a really profound lesson for me, and I think it's a lesson that we need to learn in our society right now, where cancel culture is so just and so without any foundation often, that a lie becomes the truth very quickly. But the thing about the general public is, even though the bigger media outlets don't realize this, you can't fool them. They're clever and they're authentic. So human beings see other human beings and know how to understand whether they are truthful or not. So I thought, my goodness, you know, I'm going to have to transition, change, think about what I'm going to do. And instead, what happened was all of those people who'd cradled me all of those years in the media cradled me even further, because they knew that what I was doing was authentic. So every show I do, the same with transitioning to shows and books, it comes down to their acceptance, it comes down to their support, it comes down to their groundedness, and it comes down to their belief in me. So I have a very different viewpoint of the world now to how I did pre-COVID. You know, pre-COVID, my life was, I was asked to do things and I went and did it. I said yes to everything in that respect, because I had a family and I wanted to make sure that I did the best by them. And then when that, I remember my dad had just died very tragically not long before in a really awful way. And his mantra, and this was read out in the actual government when they took my my speech to Westminster. And my dad used to say, the right way is rarely the easy way, but it will always be the right way nonetheless. And I've lived my life. And during COVID, I thought, what's the right way? And it turns out that if you do things the right way, people come with you. So I just have this debt. So when you say like I'm relatable and all of those things, it's like, this is all I have. I don't have anything else, you know. People will introduce me as best-selling author or expert or psychology expert or all of these things, and the truth is I'm just Emma, and I don't want to be anything other than that. And I've shared space with people who share space with me, and that's a real honor. I just feel really grateful. I feel like I've had some kind of midlife awakening, like some kind of epiphany. And it's like, you're always told be yourself, and it's really hard because it comes with rejection. But it means you never have to act, and it means you never have to do things that don't fit in with your moral compass. So yeah, even though this is about crime and we're talking about my show, that should be my mantra. Just always be yourself, and the right way is rarely the easy way, but it will always be the right way nonetheless, and it will pay dividends in the end. So yeah, it's a massive thanks to everybody who's followed me and supported me.
Yeah, that is a beautiful way to end our chat, Emma. Thank you. The words of your dad there.
Thank you.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, no, thank you so, so much. I wish you
Pleasure.
all the best with the tour. People are going to come and just love it. And you can catch it in Manchester on the 19th of February at the Opera House. Emma, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
No, it's been a joy chatting to you. Thanks for having me. I am bringing my brand new show, Killer Couples, to Manchester Opera House on February the 19th, 2025. This is exciting for me, guys, because this is my hometown. I would love to see you there. If you are interested as to what forms these killers, how they meet, what drives them on their murderous rampages, then this is definitely the show for you. I'll see you there.